Back in May of 2023, we began immediately talking about how we're going to solve for some of these aged or legacy cases. This is a legacy case of magnitude unlike anything I had previously seen. It is the largest number we've had and remains the largest number associated with a particular police officer. If solved for, when solved for, this case will represent 64% of all reverse conviction cases within our portfolio. It will also rid the court system of the clogging of their docket, as every magistrate judge had attached to it a Ronald Watts case, to the best of my knowledge. Our efforts to bring about a global settlement began with former Justice Sheila Finnegan and ended with Magistrate Maria Valdez. Magistrate Maria Valdez sat through 15 case conferences with my Deputy of Mass Torts, Victoria Benson. Victoria Benson, at my behest, returned to government, and I asked her specifically to work with me to work on behalf of the city to solve for these legacy aged cases. She put herself on that task, and due to her good work, the willingness of the magistrate to work with us, plaintiff's counsel ultimately agreeing to the settlement terms, we have reached a settlement, a global settlement that covers 176 cases, 180 plaintiffs. Heretofore, we've solved for some other categories of Ronald Watts cases. There were 185 or so when Victoria arrived, and we've done test cases on smaller fronts. But this is the first en masse global settlement that we will be able to pursue in front of City Council. Again, the order was entered back in the beginning of summer. We were on embargo by order of the judge, so we spoke nothing of it. The work began back in May of 2023, continued upon Victoria's arrival November of 2024, and carried forward for the balance of the year until a global settlement order was entered in July of 2025. That's what we're here to talk about today. There's a hand that's gone.
Questions?
You may. State your name, please.
Dave Savini, CBS News. Couple questions, too. Was all of this city money, or is this some of this insurance money? And can you put a dollar amount on how much you paid out to private law firms to represent police officers that were named Watts and his co-defendant, and anyone else? How much money have you paid in legal fees to this date, and is any of this insurance money?
So, yeah, in the moment of transparency, let me start with the following. I didn't tell you a number, did I? It's $90 million for covering all cases. That $90 million includes attorney's fees associated with opposing counsel. As you may know, when liability is clear, we are obligated to pick up the expenses of opposing counsel. So the $90 million is an all-in number for 176 cases, 180 plaintiffs. To your question, with respect to the insurance does not cover this category because we're under the threshold for the individual cases. Insurance would apply on a per case basis. We have no case that exceeds the threshold, so this is not dollars that would be derived from insurance payments. The other question?
The other question was how much money has been spent over the years
Sure.
to the city outsourcing to private law firms to defend the officers?
And it's an important question, David, because it was part of my analysis. Part of my analysis, and I brought on a risk manager. The department didn't have that before. Her name is Elizabeth Manning. And I asked Elizabeth Mannion to do an analysis on the risk profile in terms of how much we had spent and how much what we projected would be spent. In terms of the amount that we spent, $20 million from 2016 through the beginning of 2024. Another $5 million because we had 6 outside counsel firms, all the witness interviews. Each of the cases had, it was in a different courtroom, or many of them were in different courtrooms. So we were about $25 million in the spend. This was not a difficult conclusion for me to reach. It was a difficult task to accomplish. But the conclusion seemed clear in terms of where I thought we were from a liability standpoint, what I thought was a fiscally responsible thing to do. We needed to stop the flow of funds out with respect to these particular officers. And note for the record, they're different than others in the sense that there was an FBI investigation in which they both pled guilty. So their liability was not at issue. We needed to solve for these cases, and we have.
I just wanted to clarify on the that dollar amount that Dave was asking about. So 25 million, is that specific to Watts
It is.
cases, not the other ones?
It is not.
You mentioned that these cases are significant because there was an FBI investigation, there was a guilty plea. There are other police misconduct cases, some that have been overturned, other certificates of innocence been ordered. Are you also looking at some of these other cases?
We will be. Thank you, Leah, for the question. We will be looking at a host of other cases. In Victoria Benson's portfolio was all Watts. That portfolio, presuming acceptance by City Council and approval, will have been completely eradicated. We do have other officers and other scenarios where we will take what we've learned from this experience and apply it to others who we don't have a same situation. It is very unique, the cases associated with Ronald Watts. But we will take the learnings and apply them to other officer-involved matters. Many of them are legacy cases that have been churning to our system for decades.
And also, just to clarify, were these the civil rights cases filed in federal court, or were these state cases?
Victoria.
These are federal court cases.
The civil rights?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned the money. You wanted to stop the outflow of money. What about the subject matter and the significance of these cases that had been thrown out by the state's attorney, and most of the individuals have been given certificates of innocence? Not about the money, but about the subject. What are your feelings about why this was a just resolution?
When you have 2 officers that were under investigation and ultimately pled guilty for a series of acts, we needed to look at how we were going about pursuing a resolution associated with said acts differently. Once the state's attorney took the posture of reversing and then the ultimate certificates were issued, we had to have a reset with respect to how those cases were being treated. Hence the creation of the Mass Torts Division that Victoria Benson is leading, that I established a year and a half or so ago. Hence the addition of a risk manager that I established almost 2 years ago. Hence the reason for restructuring of our entire federal civil rights litigation divisions so that we could begin to look at categorizations of cases. Is it appropriate to settle? Should we be on a mediation path? Is it a fact pattern that dictates continued litigation? We're not afraid to litigate. We've won some federal civil rights cases. That is true. But the courts have also spoken. With some of the largest judgments of late, the courts are saying, solve for this problem. We're answering. We're solving for this problem by ridding them of all of the Ronald Watts cases, that are before them. Again, almost every magistrate judge had a Ronald Watts case. That is extremely rare. And we needed to take a fresh look at how we were going about seeking resolution for what had been a storied past for the city of Chicago. And I will share with you that I did talk to the superintendent so that he would be aware of where we are with respect to the resolution of the cases and the ultimate outcome. And I suspect you will have your separate conversations with him. He was very supportive. This is an important chapter that we are closing for the police department. Their move towards constitutional policing is not reflected from our perspective in what occurred with these two particular officers. There were a number of officers, I think additional 20 more that were investigated in this process, but these two officers are the ones that were found guilty, and we need to solve for that problem and move forward, and we are.
Then, I have more questions, but if anyone else has questions.
All right, there. Lexi, you manage the
It seems
gaggle.
like the same time. I'll start here and work my way down to you.
Hi, based on the.
State your name again so I can make sure I
Michael
repeat it.
David
Hi.
Ryan. Based on the amount of money that's already been paid out to settle some of the Watts cases, do you have an inference or estimate as to how much money the city will save by doing this as a global settlement versus doing them individually? And can you also talk maybe after that about some of the challenges that you briefly talked about in actually getting to this point?
Sure. First, to your question, and thank you, Michael, for the question. It's really an important one. A part of the analysis that I have my risk manager, Elizabeth Manning, run was cost. If we had continued down this road for another 3 years, what would be the cost? If we continued down the road for another 5 years, what would be the cost? Her estimation was a staggering figure. 350 million to 500 million we'd be spending if we continued on this path. Again, these officers pled guilty for conduct unbecoming, taking of funds inappropriately. There was the liability of the city, from my perspective, was clear. We could continue to pursue litigation. Outside opposing counsel fees would go up. Our cost to litigate and represent would go up. And the outcome would still be pretty certain, or we could solve for that problem. We have done so. So we're saving the city hundreds of millions of dollars by solving for the Ronald Watts cases today at a 90 million all in, including attorney's fees. How we got here, I did something that's probably unusual when I came in, probably within 3 to 4 months of having arrived in the department. I sat in the case conference myself. I went to former magistrate Sheila Finnegan's chambers. She had opposing counsel there. We had our outside counsel present. I sat, I listened, I learned. I better understood in that moment how comprehensive our exposure was. I came back, did the risk analysis, and then called Victoria and asked her as a veteran if she would return, and she agreed. We talked through how we were going to move forward. We developed varied strategies. Victoria went to her first case conference and came back, and we were in a hemisphere in terms of the per incarceration rate that was unachievable. That was case conference 1 under the current magistrate, Judge Maria Valdez. Victoria brought that information back, and Victoria and I would strategize. She would go back in, and she spent countless hours, as did the magistrate. This is something that I want folks to understand. This is unusual. That magistrate sat in for 15 case conferences, countless hours, sitting with us, sitting with opposing counsel, sitting with all parties together, opposing counsel and us worked separately. This was a lot of work by a lot of parties to bring this to closure. It was not, there were no guaranteed outcomes here. It was a confluence of events and a willingness of all parties to sit together to solve for this problem. And that's how we brought this to closure.
Thank you. We'll take you next.
Were there any other terms of the settlement, or any formal apologies or admissions wrongdoing by the city? Or this?
No. But
Please make sure to state your name and your question, please.
Mitch Armstrong from the Sun-Times.
Mitch, good to meet you, Mitch. No, this is a some certain, meaning it is a dollar-based settlement, and we did not have admissions at all associated with the settlement.
I'm also curious, this is a city council that has rebuffed other settlements that the department has forwarded. I guess, how do you expect it to be received?
As we present the facts to them on Monday, we're anticipating that they will be received with great interest, because recall, many of these alders who are still, some of them may not be old enough to know who Ronald Watts was and what he represented. They will. For those who are more seasoned, they had to live through it. It was a horrible time for the city, and I think once Victoria presents the details associated with the basis for the settlement, we will receive favorable vote from the committee, but we will do everything in our power to make sure they're as informed as possible in rendering their decision. Yes, there have been occasions where they have been, they've taken a different view on individualized settlement, but in this case, given the legacy of Ronald Watts and Mr. Muhammad, given the sheer volume of people that they, shall you say, touched adversely, and given the exposure for the city and the fiscal responsibility this represents, I'm hopeful that each alder will stand with us on this matter.
Thank you. We just have a little bit under 10 minutes left. We'll kick it off next with WBBM.
Thank you. Jeff Buckles from WBBM News
Jeff.
Radio. Thank you for answering our questions. I want to follow on Mitch's question dealing with the city council, and specifically what the city's scenario would be if for some reason the finance committee on Monday does not approve this thing, or if the full council does not.
I'm going to speak a positive into existence. It is my belief that we will get support of the Committee on Finance on Monday. I cannot speak for each individual alderman. I suspect many of you will follow up with them. We believe that once we present the facts to them, that we will have their support. Again, pretty fundamental. It's in the city's interest. It's the responsible thing to do. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do. It limits our liability. The courts have spoken through other judgments of what they think of these kinds of cases. So we are doing what is proper and what is the legally right thing to do in this instance in terms of settling these 176 cases with 180 plaintiffs.
Justin Lawrence with Cranes.
It's just,
So what we see, or I guess more importantly, the finance committee, the city council see, will there be like an itemized breakdown of each individual settlement for each case? Will they be presented with that?
we will be presenting some details, but I'll let Victoria respond to that.
Sure, we have the individual information, which the expectation is that individualized cases will be identified within the ordinance once it's passed. And then as releases and settlement agreements continue to be executed, obviously that information is going to be available publicly.
Okay, I guess my follow-up there is, and I suspect not, but can you clarify, like, can the city council say, well, we don't like these 5 cases,
They
we
cannot.
don't like those 5? You know?
They cannot.
Yeah.
And that's an important question. This is it's an all or nothing. It's global, and I recognize it's unusual. But these are the unusual circumstances. And if we were to take it case by case, the cost would go up, the liability would go up, the time in would go up. It would unfold over many years as it has. And I'm simply not willing to pursue it in that manner. So they will not be able to parse out these 5 versus another 5. And I will share with you one of the things that occurred as we got to this place, and I didn't give that detail earlier, but you triggered a memory. When we were sitting initially with both judges, the cases were taken in groups of 19. And we were asking and answering questions around that 19, the value of the case, exposure of the case, the specifics associated with the case. It became increasingly clear that there was a homophilous relationship, a throughput across all the cases. So the judge in her wisdom said, why am I considering only 19 when I can consider all of them? We in our wisdom said, yes, Judge, we'd really like for you to consider all of the cases. And that, again, was part of the evolution of the discussion. It started off as groups of 19 for it to be digestible, because sheer volume made it difficult for some. And then we were able to ultimately move to the global settlement of all cases.
Just to follow up on what you said, I mean, was it the city's intention to, going into this, to have, like, I guess, the global settlement?
Sure.
For all, or did the judge, as you said, kind of move you towards that?
We went in with that as an objective, but it was aspirational. We had no way of knowing for certain that we would achieve said objective. But I set the objective. I let the mayor know that that was my objective. He stepped back, we stepped forward. We worked with both magistrates to get there, but it was uncertain if we would. So the goal was always a global. If we had to take it in tranches, we would have likely reluctantly looked at that as well, but ultimately the goal was always a global.
Just to clarify something
Dave?
on this, because I think it's, want to understand it better. Did you, like, how much would be the biggest settlement in this, like, they're all getting different amounts, correct?
Correct.
So, like, from what on the high end to the low end, and was there a formula? Was it like you spent X amount of time in jail?
There is a formula. Cue up Victoria
Can you explain
Benson.
it, how you came to like the?
Sure. So much of this involves plaintiff's counsel as well in terms of this. So this isn't a formula that the city simply applied to a figure and has identified what each individual has gotten. This is also based on information from the plaintiff's attorneys as well. Just in terms of a range I can give you is the lowest payout is at $150,000. And the highest is, I believe is 3.4 million, just over that figure. It might be 3.9. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact figures in front of me. And that's for an individual who spent nearly 10 years in custody. So as I'm sure many of you who cover these types of cases understand, a lot of these settlements are driven by time in custody, per year rates of incarceration, et cetera, and that's largely the formula. But a lot of this in terms of identifying which plaintiff is getting which amount of money is based heavily on discussions and information from plaintiff's counsel.
And so we have the 25 million spent on private representation up to this point, and then we have the 90 million settlement. What about the past? How much has he cost? How much has Watts cost us? Because he had some settlements before this, right?
He did. We've settled 9 cases since I came back in July 2024. So we've had 9 through the end of June.
And do you remember what those were?
I don't remember the exact figure in front of me, but it's just over $11 million.
If you want an exact number, we're happy to provide that,
Yeah,
because
so
that's part of the
what
record.
is the total bill for Watts?
That is part of the record as well. So we're happy to provide that if you need it.
We have time for one last question.
Anna Sachenko with WBZ. I just wanted to clarify the 350 to 500 million estimate. That is what it would cost to settle these cases individually?
That was, no, that was all in, not individually.
All in, okay.
If we had to, if we continued for another 3 to 5 years, that was the figure that we were given in terms of what our potential exposure would have been.
And I realize I didn't introduce myself before. Leah Hope, ABC 7, and I just had one final follow-up. You have mentioned the term right, but you prefaced it by saying legally right thing to do. I guess not in the judicial term right, but in the common sense understanding of right, is this the right thing to do?
It is the proper resolution under the facts and circumstances that we have. We had, again, 2 officers who were investigated by the FBI, pled guilty to said on a host of issues, and adversely impacted the lives of many. Those convictions were reversed. We have an opportunity to solve for a host of those problems, and we're going to do that. So it is, in this instance, given those facts, circumstances, the fiscally responsible thing to do and the legally proper course. And thank you for that question, Leah.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.